Jesus was a revolutionary. There was an image that Time magazine once rated as the most recognizable image in the world, and it was an image of revolution. It was of a man called Che Guevara, and it pictures him looking nobly into the distance, imagining a different world. He was a Marxist revolutionary. He helped Fidel Castro in the Cuban Revolution at a time when people felt that the US was acting like an empire. People turned to Marxism and people like Che Guevara to give them an alternative. And this image of Che Guevara is the icon of revolution. It's the revolutionary dream. The one who won't lay down and take it from the empire stands up and looks nobly to the possibility of change. But this image only says some things. Che Guevara was described by people who knew him during the revolution as the butcher because he was so violent. It's hard to see that in this image of noble revolution. And if you've seen the film The Motorcycle Diaries, you'll have seen the story of Che Guevara travelling around Latin America with his mate on a motorbike. They flirt with girls, they eat, they party, and they learn about the reality of the injustice that Latin America suffered. None of this gets captured in the image. The image tells its own story. In our series through Matthew's Gospel, today we carry on through chapter 16 and up onto another mountaintop. This time, Jesus with Peter, James and John, and he is transfigured. He goes all shiny bright, dazzling white, and Elijah and Moses appear next to him. And clouds descend and a voice comes from the clouds saying, "This is my son with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." And Elijah and Moses disappear, the cloud disappears, and Jesus and Peter, James and John walk back down the mountainside. Now there's something we need to know here about Elijah and Moses. These two men were the icons, the symbols of Jewish revolution. The Jews were dreaming of a kingdom of God that would overthrow the Romans and establish their own nation centered in Jerusalem. And they looked to Elijah and they looked to Moses to bring that revolution about. Now here's the thing, when people remembered Elijah, they saw an image of a revolutionary. They didn't remember the whole story. Just like the people who saw the icon of Che Guevara don't remember the whole story of his life. But they remember one moment on top of a mountain called Mount Carmel, when Elijah challenges the prophets of Baal to a duel. And they build an altar, and Elijah builds an altar. And they dance around all day, and they cut themselves and call out to their God for fire to descend and burn up the offering. But it does not. And then Elijah says, watch this. And he douses the thing in water. And he prays to Yahweh, and fire comes down and burns up the whole thing. And then the bit that they didn't tell you in Sunday school, he slaughters every last one of the prophets of Baal. And this is why Elijah is the hero, the icon of revolution, because he is the one who does what it takes to rid the promised land of the contamination within. And when the people look to Moses, as an icon of revolution, they're thinking about the man who liberated their people from Egypt. And they're thinking about the man who walked up Mount Sinai and got the law from Yahweh himself. And here's the thing. It is the law of Moses that makes Israel great. It is the law of Moses that enables Israel to become a nation in its own right. Because the law isn't just a nice way to live. For Israel, the law is a national constitution. It's how they frame their whole existence. And so people look to Moses as the icon of revolution because he is the one who could make Israel great again. They look to Elijah as the one who would rid them from the threat within, and to Moses as the one who could make them great once again. It's about power. With Elijah, you have the power to overcome the pagans who would seek to usurp Yahweh. And with Moses, you have the power to turn Israel into an empire. Now Jesus goes down the mountain with his disciples, and at the bottom the rest of the disciples are there, and they've been trying to cast out a demon from a boy possessed with seizures. And his father's really worried that he's going to throw himself into the fire amidst one of these seizures. And Jesus heals the boy, but then he's angry with the disciples and says, you only need faith as small as a mustard seed. And you can say to this mountain, move, and it will go and throw itself into the sea. You can say to this mountain, move. Not just any old mountain, but this mountain right here, the one that we've just walked down, the one at the top of which was Elijah and Moses, the symbols of Jewish revolution, there with Jesus. And it was Jesus of whom God said, listen to him. Because the people of Israel were so caught up in these visions, so caught up in these dreams of violent revolution and of making Israel a great nation once again, that they had become like a boy possessed. And the seizures that it brought out in them would throw them into the fire and destroy them. But Jesus is saying, you do not have to live like this. With just a little faith, you can say to this mountain, move. And Jesus goes on and he welcomes a little child. Says the kingdom of God is for these. This is about powerlessness. He tells a parable in which to forgive a debt is kingly. And then he travels down south with his disciples. And he meets some Pharisees and they question him about Moses' teaching on divorce. And Jesus says that it should be harder for a man to divorce his wife, because in those days women were traded like property. And so for a man to divorce his wife was easy, but Jesus ups the requirement, makes it more difficult than Moses had, because he wants to protect the rights of women. He wants to take the powerless and give them power, and take power away from the powerful. Jesus meets the rich young ruler who asks him, how can I inherit the life of the age to come? And Jesus says, have you kept the law of Moses? And the guy says, yeah, I kept the law. And Jesus says, well, sell everything you have and then give it to the poor. And the guy doesn't want to do that, because keeping the law of Moses was one thing, but giving up his wealth, the source of his power, was quite another. In Jesus' world, the party is with the powerless. Jesus welcomes another child. And Jesus in chapter 21 goes to Jerusalem and he rides into the city on a donkey, and he is followed by an entourage of little people dancing and singing. And he has no army. He is no violent revolutionary. And he goes to the temple, to the seat of Moses, but he doesn't seek to establish it as a nation. Instead, he goes to the tables of the money changers and he throws them to the floor. because the revolution of Jesus is on behalf of the powerless, and the temple oppressed the powerless through extortionate exchange rates, and Jesus' revolution turns the tables. It says that the last will be first, that the meek will inherit the earth, that the little children are at the centre, because in the kingdom of God, in Jesus' kingdom, the party is with the powerless. There's a moment in the story of Che Guevara in that film, The Motorcycle Diaries, where he goes into Peru and visits a colony of people who have leprosy. And it's Che Guevara's birthday. And the nuns and the doctors who live on the opposite shore from the people who have leprosy throw Che Guevara a party. And at one moment he leaves the party and he goes down to the riverbank. And the river is rushing past, and no one's ever jumped and swum this. But he dives in, even though he has chronic asthma, and he pounds his way across the waves. And people are worried he's going to die. But eventually he hauls himself out the other side and greets his friends, those whom everyone else has excluded, because the party's with the powerless. The party is with the powerless. So the question is, are you willing to be part of this revolution and give up your power?